Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Google Pixel 7 and see how this particular phone holds up in 2025. Now, here's the thing. I personally love the Pixel 7. I think it was a very, very decent phone when it first came out. Would it be the first phone I would recommend people to buy anymore? Maybe not for like a main flagship, but for a older, a couple-year-old phone, I think this thing still holds up fairly well. It would be still a phone that I'd recommend some people to buy, and we'll take a look at that throughout this whole entire video. But first things first, if you want to pick up the Google Pixel 7 or some other phones I'd recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description below. You can get them from there, and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the Google Pixel 7, on the front side of this particular phone, you're basically getting a pretty large 6.3-inch AMOLED display. Now, this phone came out in 2022, so the panels now are severely different than what this panel was basically giving you at that time. So it's a different type of structure of a panel. It's kind of like a rectangular type of display, not really any rounded corners. So it kind of gives you this unique type of feeling, although it doesn't really feel like any phone nowadays. And most phones have gone away from this type of design. It's still a hole punch display, which is nice, but it is a 90 Hz panel. This, I think, is still better than 60 Hz, but a majority of phones nowadays are giving you 120 Hz panels. So this thing basically giving you a little bit of a lower refresh rate compared to some of the competition or some of the newer upgrades. It is a little bit inconvenient, a little bit maybe not the best idea for this particular device, but it's not terrible. But that is one thing you might run into here for the most part. Another thing, 1400 nits of brightness. Not that bad. There's a lot of phones that came out in 2022 that aren't that high of brightness. Even in 2024, 2024 was the last year, there were still some phones that were coming out, more mid-tier budget phones that didn't give you, high brightness panels, but that might be another thing you might run into in this particular panel as well. On the bottom of this phone, you're getting a USB Type-C port, which is still perfectly fine. On the back side, you're getting this glass back, which still looks pretty good. A little bit of a protruding camera lens at the very, very top, but it's not that big of a deal. Dual camera setup on the backside. You're still maintaining things like wireless charging on this phone, but there are a few things that we're missing out on this device that we're basically getting on a majority of phones that came out nowadays. Like I mentioned before, this thing is lacking 120 Hz, although it still has 90 Hz. AMOLED displays are still great, but nowadays we have dynamic AMOLED and all those ones. No high brightness here, lack of 2000 nits of brightness, which that in and of itself would be a pretty big reason to not maybe buy this phone in some cases. But beyond that, and the lack of frosted glass back, a lot of flagships nowadays do give you a little bit of a better build quality with flat sides and rounded sides. Unfortunately, this thing doesn't really give you that either. But I still think it looks pretty good. It still feels pretty fine. And for a 3-year-old phone technically now, I think it looks and feels pretty good for the most part. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there. Now from the price tag side, this is a reason why I think a lot of people go through and buy these particular phones. This particular device is costing you around $210. So this thing really doesn't cost an insane amount. It is fairly a good price device for the type of price you're paying for here. And I think that is a really nice thing going on for this type of phone. The fact that you can buy it, doesn't cost that much money, and it's available in a lot of different places, that might be a really big reason why some people would go through and buy this type of phone. So you're just going to have to kind of think about that. Although, like I said, this phone went down in price, but also a lot of flagships that came out the year after this one also went down in value as well. And they're not going to be nearly as expensive as basically this one is. So, and they might be cheaper, they might be more expensive, but they might be better. So kind of keep that in mind when it comes down to it from that particular side as well. Now, when it comes down to the camera side, like I mentioned before, this thing's giving you a dual camera setup on the back side. So it's giving you a 50 megapixel wide angle lens and then a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera. And then on the front side, it's giving you a 10.8 megapixel ultra wide camera. Now, the thing I can tell you about this particular camera when it comes down to it is that it's a good camera, right? It's a good camera. It's not a bad camera. It's a decent one for the most part. Is it the best camera of 2022? No. Is it the best camera now? Absolutely not. But it gives you a good type of layout for what type of phone this is, right? You're getting 4K at 60 resolution on the backside, which is great. And you're also getting 4K at 60 on the front. So that is a really good type of resolution frame rate to kind of film in, because as long as, in my opinion, you have those two types of layouts, then you're basically good for the most part. You're not really going to feel like you're missing out on like an insane amount for the most part. But here's the thing, with the Google Pixel 7, this thing is starting to show its age just a little bit, and there might be better devices out there that I would recommend buying over this thing when it comes down to it. So that right there is just another big thing. Again, I don't think it's like the biggest deal in the world, but if you are going to go through and pick up a phone, you probably want to go and get a phone that's a little bit better than this. And considering that the Pixel, 9 Pros do now give you, 8K resolution to film in, this thing is just a little bit outdated. It's not too bad, but just keep in mind that the camera isn't the best, but it's still decent for the most part. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there too. Now, when it comes down to the software longevity, this has always been a really good reason of picking up basically a Google Pixel. These phones last for a very, very long amount of time. So that in and of itself can be a really big reason to go through and pick up, these types of devices. The reason why these types of Pixels, are so sought after is because they last for such a long period of time. And I think, like I mentioned before, this in and of itself is a very nice thing going on for this type of device. Now, number one, the big thing to keep in mind here is that with something like the Google Pixel 7, this device is kind of a couple years in. It's about 2 years into its software longevity. It's probably going to get another 2 to 3 software updates. So still it's here, still it's not going anywhere. And I do think this in and of itself is kind of a nice thing going on for this type of device when it comes down to it. So from that side in and of itself, that kind of covers it up there too. The battery life on this phone is actually pretty big. It's a 4,355 milliamp battery, and this in and of itself, it is a pretty large battery to have inside of a device. Once again, if you're going to go through and pick up a phone, you are going to be getting a pretty big size battery inside of this phone, which is something that's really, really nice to have as well. So everything about this phone screams to me that it's just like a pretty decent like mid-tier device, but then it takes us to the performance. The performance of this phone will kind of add to that. You're going to be getting a Google Tensor G2 chipset inside with 8GB of RAM. Now, the thing with the RAM inside of this particular phone and the performance in general is that the RAM is fine. The performance of this phone is pretty good. The only thing going on, and the kind of thing that may not irk you, but the thing that's just a little bit different within this type of device compared to some other ones, is that with some other devices, you are basically going to be getting somewhat of like a better type of experience, especially if you're going for the Snapdragon route. Those Snapdragon phones are going to be giving you a much better chipset. These phones are still fast. They're still going to be giving you a very fast device, and that's something I really do like. But I would probably tell you, if you are going to go through and pick up something like a Google Pixel, it might make a lot of sense for you to kind of be understanding that the performance may not be that great, even compared to other 2022 devices. So that's just kind of how it goes. I don't think it's a terrible thing, but that is just one other thing you're going to be noticing here. So overall, to kind of sum up this whole entire comparison, I will definitely tell you, I think the Google Pixel 7 is still a very, very good phone to buy. Right? I think it's a very good priced phone. I think it still makes a lot of sense to go and buy it. It may not be the most perfect phone of all time, but it still is like a really good device, and I'm still a big fan of it. But there might be some other devices I'd recommend buying more so than this thing. I think a Pixel 8 is a very good phone to buy. I think an iPhone 14 Pro or 14 are very solid devices too. And even a Galaxy S22 if you want to, but mostly the Galaxy S23, those are a little bit better than this thing in a lot of important ways. So I'd probably recommend buying those ones, but this one is still a very good device too. You cannot go wrong with it in this particular year. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would be so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.